The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I am your host, Eamon Brennan of Buzzer at eamonbrennan.com. That's my newsletter. Go check it out. Also, check out Basket Under Review, the best new college basketball website on the planet. We've got a great show for you today. Our buddy Tate Frazier of The Ringer is back with us to talk about everything we saw on the college basketball calendar this past weekend, including beginning with, notably, an absolute demolition of Kentucky at the hands of Gonzaga and what appears to be a pretty intractable and potentially unsolvable situation for Mark Pope in Lexington, both on the tactical front and also the emotional front. The body language physicians have been out in force with the Wildcats, and they're not liking what they're seeing. The diagnosis is negative. We'll also talk about a huge Iowa State win at Purdue, Duke's big win at Michigan State, and Cam Boozer's performance, and kind of a theory or a read I have about Cam Boozer. I don't know what I'd even call it, but just kind of like a vibe I have about him that as a college to NBA type pipeline player that might be interesting to talk. I'm going to throw that out to Tate and see what he makes of it, and a whole lot more besides. But before we get into all that, as ever, it's incumbent upon me to remind you, go check out basketunderreview.com. Sign up for $10 a month. You get access to all the written stuff there, which is really good, high level. It's the hows and whys of what you're seeing in any given college basketball game. It will make you a smarter fan. You also, for that $10, get access to Trilly Donovan's Discord, where he breaks news and where the communities are super lively. And you support this show and all of the stuff we put out for free. Great shows, Stats by Will and Jim, Scout Team, Weekend Under Review has been fantastic so far. So go check out the site, sign up, support us, and support all the great work everybody's doing at Basket Under Review. Also, please check out our sponsor, Homefield, the presenting sponsor of this show, homefieldapparel.com. Best place in the world to get college athletics apparel. Maybe just as a thought example, like a thought bubble here, just out of nowhere. Like if you say, for example, in a world where Indiana football was the number one team in the country, the number one seed in the college football playoff, and the current and reigning Big Ten champions, maybe you want to get a t-shirt or like a sweater or something to commemorate that fact. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. It could happen one day in a crazy world that none of us would ever envision. This might be a scenario that impacts your life. In any case, Homefield would be the place that you would do that. You should also go check out Homefield's socials or just their website. They're embarking on a Homefield house tour where they're going to college basketball arenas for like pregame experiences. They'll have stuff for you to buy, check out games, stuff like that. So they were in Indianapolis this past weekend. Good time to be in Indianapolis. For the Louisville, Indiana game. Outside that, they'll be at the Jimmy V Classic coming up this week, and then a bunch of other dates all the way through to the Final Four, April 4th through the 6th. So go check out homefieldapparel.com, buy something, tell them Basket Under Review sent you, and thank you very much, as ever, to Homefield for sponsoring our show. Okay, Tate, we did it. We're in it. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Great week of college basketball, a lot of storylines. It's great to have Darren Peterson back in college basketball. I think that was something that was very encouraging for, getting the casual kind of NBA, whatever basketball fan you want to call him, to get re-engaged with college basketball. We also have a blue blood that is floundering. We're going to get to that. And I think whenever you have a situation like that, I had people texting me over the weekend, checking in on this Gonzaga-Kentucky game, being like, what's going on with Kentucky? What's happening with this team? So a lot of eyeballs on the sport, a lot of questions about the sport. It's always tough when you have the CFP kind of competing against some of these big games. I still will never understand the calendar as far as scheduling, trying to go up against these stuff. Also, NFL games going up against Mizzou, Kansas. But, the college basketball overlords, we make the schedule, we deal with the schedule. But the real heads like you and I were watching all the games. So a lot to get to, and I'm excited to talk about it all, man.
Yeah, there's a lot to get to, and I think we have to start with Kentucky because it was such a mess. I mean, I think there's two things, and we'll come back to this when we talk about Ole Miss and Chris Beard later, because he laid it out in his sort of assessment of his team after the St. John's game. And his quotes that stuck out to me that I originally pulled just to talk about Ole Miss, but they apply to Kentucky as I've been thinking about them, is, he said after the game, we're literally trying to get 5 guys on the floor to play as hard as they possibly can. That's tough for me as a coach because I've never had to say that about a team. Maybe tonight was a step in the right direction. Again, he's talking about the St. John's game. The next thing you have to do after the effort and attitude is you have to play well. You don't have to play perfect, but you have to play well. So he was basically talking like there's 2 fronts. And for him, it's always been a baseline understanding my team plays hard. And that's been a struggle for him early in this season. Kentucky is flailing on both fronts right now. They are both tactically not the right fit personnel wise. They have huge gaps in the sort of things you want a basketball team to do, particularly a Mark Pope team that we've talked about before, the kinds of offenses that he's traditionally built and been willing to sacrifice on the defensive end a little bit for. None of that is there right now. That's the first problem. And the second problem is that Kentucky doesn't appear to be playing very hard at all, particularly if something goes bad. They get down early in a game like they did against Gonzaga, and you start seeing even a guy like Otega Owe, for example, who's supposed to be the leader of the team and the SEC player, preseason player of the year, and a guy who last year, who absolutely took the world, the SEC by storm in many ways last year because of his effort. He's a defensive lockdown defender, steals guy, effort guy, get to the front of the rim. He's not a big perimeter shooter. He's not a finesse technical guy. He's like, play hard, beat you to spots, get past you, even if you're playing off me, all effort type stuff. And you see some of the possessions in the Kentucky game where he and other guys are just kind of walking back, floating around defensively, not doing much. And there is whichever, it's hard to untangle which problem is the origin. It's a little chicken egg, but both of them are not happening for Kentucky right now. And that's how you get a team ostensibly with this much talent to look as bad as it did against Gonzaga, because for whatever the problems offensively, and they are there, and I think we can get into, and Will Warren, wrote a great piece leading into that game that he titled "The Kentucky Trolley Problem," because it's basically, if you set aside all of the effort, intensity, emotional stuff and put that to one side and just look at the lineups that Pope kind of has to navigate and figure out to get the most, there isn't one good solution like, if we just play this 5, 6, 7 guys, this is how it can work. There's trade-offs in every direction that are duplicative and troublesome. But it was particularly noticeable that even if you don't have that, this Kentucky team still should be physical, tough, able to play defense, able to rebound on the offensive end. And it's not doing any of that stuff that we normally associate with teams that play really hard as a baseline.
Yeah, on Tuesday we talked about Kentucky was the team to watch this week. We were going to get a real read on who they were as a program. First, in the SEC ACC Challenge, North Carolina, fellow blue blood coming into the building, and then obviously going up against Gonzaga, who was trying to bounce back from what Michigan did to them, which was a pure demolition. So the fact that we have the results now and you and I can dissect those results, this is, if you came to both of us on Tuesday when we were having that conversation at the end of the show and said, this is what would happen. They would go on a 10-plus minute scoring drought after being up the entire game against North Carolina and ultimately end up losing the game. Then they'll show up in Nashville against Gonzaga and get blitzed from the jump and have no real chance at making a run in this game. I mean, maybe at the start of the second half, they showed a little bit of sign of life, but Gonzaga responded expeditiously, and then the game was over from there. So, I mean, this is a nightmare scenario for Mark Pope. I mean, look at what they did last year. It was an offensive revelation. Everyone was so excited. They were 1 point per possession. I mean, that's what they did every single game outside of 4 games. It was like, wow, what a great world we live in with this Mark Pope offense. And now this year, it's the complete opposite. And it feels like there's 2 different groups on this team, right? There's a defensive group. There's an offensive group. When the offensive group is in, they don't play good defense. When the defensive group is in, they can't figure out how to score. So no matter what, and I think that's why Will wrote such a great piece, because he's like, no matter what piece you put into the puzzle, there's always some piece missing. And whether it's defensively, whether it's offensively, whether it's a point guard, Jalen Lowe got some minutes in that game, but it, obviously didn't make too much of a difference as far as trying to stimulate that offensive, kind of approach and prowess. Because when you watch this team, especially in the half court, I mean, even you and I could probably talk about this, and go on and on. But I mean, there's no cutting, there's no movement. It's a lot of guys staring at the guy who's dribbling the basketball, basically looking like, okay, I guess it's your turn to do something. The definition of who's supposed to do what feels very off. Aberdeen, is he supposed to be the guy? He's been the leading scorer. Colin Chandler, is he supposed to be the guy? Always obviously supposed to be the guy, but he looks like he's in a different world at this point in time. So, I mean, just in general, there's so many things you can nitpick with this group. I mean, Yelovich was great against North Carolina. He was horrible against Gonzaga. So there's no consistency from game to game as well. And I think one of the biggest bragging points for Kentucky going into the season was like, hey, we're 11 guys deep. We're going to platoon potentially some of these lineups. We're going to be so diverse with what we were able to do. But the funniest and most ironic part of that, even I would like to get your thoughts on this. I mean, it feels like there's so much redundancy with guys, right? I mean, it's like Jasper Johnson and Aberdeen are doing the exact same thing. They're both guys who are, I guess, are playing point guard, but they're not really playing point guard. They're just looking for their own shot. And that's a senior and a freshman. So, I mean, it just feels like there's a lot of questions, and it feels like Mark Pope, I mean, watching him in that press conference, he just looks so dejected by all of it. And I would say it feels like, the replacements when, Shane Falco talks about quicksand, I would say it's like quicksand, but at least in quicksand, you kind of try to fight. And the more you fight, the more you sink. They don't even look like they're fighting. They look like they're just in the quicksand, slowly descending into the abyss. And I think that's probably the most damning part for Kentucky.
Yeah, they're taking the calm and rational approach to being stuck in quicksand, which is to just gradually let it overtake
accept
you.
Your fate.
Really.
Yeah.
Hey, they got me. Don't even try calling for help. I'm done.
Why am I in a swamp? Yeah.
I shouldn't have been here in the first place. This is on me. It's really odd. I mean, again, like I try not to over-index too much of the emotional side, right? Because it's hard to know. But Kentucky is an example of a team that, like, usually you're reading between the lines a little bit, and you may get a little bit of, some breadcrumbs from local reporters, or you hear a few things here and there. But Kentucky is an example from Mark Pope on down, where they've just worn it on their sleeve from the jump. The Louisville game was their first big game of the season. They have some big locker room thing that Pope kind of talks about, but doesn't really want to talk about. And he's kind of get cute and winky about it after the fact, when most Kentucky fans are like, wait, what? Why bring it up then? Like, what's the deal here? It's kind of weird. Then they have, and so you can kind of write that off. It's one game, right? Louisville's a good team. They lose. Obviously, Kentucky fans don't accept that. But from a neutral perspective, with no investment in the outcome of the game, you can say, hey, you lost by 8 at Louisville. You didn't play
early
great
in the season. Yeah.
It's okay. The Michigan State game was the one that even before the game, Mark Pope looked haunted. And then after the game, after they get completely blown out and just out-toughed by a Michigan State team, that you want to see an example of a team overplaying its talent through effort and hard work and cohesion, that is Michigan State. Up to and including the game against Duke that they lost this weekend at home. That was a good performance against a team with much more talent than them. And they make it work because they play so hard and they do all the little stuff that you can control with your effort. And it's old school stuff and it's cliche or whatever, but it really matters. And the Carolina game at home, not great, particularly the way it ended. And then to come out against Gonzaga the way they did, I thought was, again, you can get down to a team like Gonzaga. Gonzaga's really, really good. The Michigan game, I think, maybe threw people off the scent a little bit. And they talked about a little bit about it on the broadcast, which is probably smart for anybody thinking about, predicting the game or betting on it coming in, is like Gonzaga took an absolute bludgeoning from Michigan and then went home for like 9 days and sat on it. And you can guarantee, like Mark Few, whatever was going to happen, they were going to get a good performance.
They said that he had something on his locker every day that reminded him of his 1 point. Like they had like signs of like number 1, this number, like they were just like putting all this, like it was like a manipulation of the mind that Mark Few was doing to Graham Ike. And if you watch Ike in that game, he was like shot out of a cannon. It felt like he wanted to destroy anything in front of him. And fortunately for him, Kentucky has no front court really. So he was able to destroy it pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the difference between how he played against Michigan and how he played against Kentucky, and part of that was a function of his own performance and just playing way better, and part of it was also the difference between Kentucky's front court being essentially non-existent and Michigan's being like world devouring. But we should like, and we've done so just now, like give credit to Gonzaga. It's a really good team. They are so smooth. They make a lot more sense playing against high level competition than they have sometimes in the past, where they've had to cheat a little bit with the kinds of wings they've had. Like they have elite top level defensive versatile wings all across the perimeter now. And so they don't look physically outmatched unless, again, they're playing against Michigan and, Mara is just like eating everything in sight. But that aside, like, you can get down to a team like Gonzaga quickly. You can get down 10, 15, 20 points. I mean, look what happened to Indiana against Louisville. They got down 16-0 early. And the game, that was essentially the gap that decided the game over the rest of the 40 minutes. But Indiana played an even game with Louisville for the rest of the time. And you could tell they were in the fight. They were together. They were trying things, even if they weren't coming off. Like, there was a real focus and effort and like, okay, let's go, guys, whatever. You just saw none of it with Kentucky from the jump with them, really. And that's a little bit surprising because, again, I was saying this to my own subscriber chat on Substack, like during the game and after the game on Saturday. Because someone had posted, like, I wonder if Pope is at risk of losing the locker room here. And I'm like, to me, it looks like he already does.
Yeah.
Like, he already has. Like, because, again, you look at this group of Kentucky players and the offense could be a mess because they just kind of don't fit together, right? And the shooting isn't there, and the sort of pass playmaking that he's always had, particularly from big guys, and had last year with Amari Williams and had with Ali Khalifa in the past at BYU. They don't have that. And that was a choice in the offseason that they made, and they were going to have to recalibrate on the offensive end. But the trade-off was always supposed to be, yeah, but look at all this defensive talent. Look at all this size. Look at the number of guys we can roll out at different positions and how we can match up with different styles of play and different offensives. And they haven't done any of that. And I do think that is a big effort component that just is not there for them. And it's stunning to see. And it's, again, some of the clips going around of Otega Owe, he's hardly the only culprit. And he has done some good stuff at the start of the season, even when they haven't played well together. He was better against Carolina and got to his, more traditional, I guess, spots more often. But some of the clips of the way he played once Gonzaga had a big lead, running back on defense and just standing while a guy back cuts him for a layup, was just like, that looks to me like a group of players who are not hearing any sort of message that they are bought in on from their coach. And it's rarely quite as obvious as this.
Yeah, Mark Pope, like you said, it feels like he doesn't know what buttons to push. Even in that game, like as they're just getting walloped in the opener, he just starts looking down at the bench. They kind of show him a little bit, and he looks at Yelovich and is like, I guess you're the right answer for now. I'll throw you into the game. But they obviously have an issue just internally with how they like playing with each other. And I don't know how you figure out what the right lineup is. And there's only one team I was willing to listen to when it comes to like, hey, we have a guy injured and that's going to be a big deal. And it's really Kansas. It's like, yeah, you have the number one pick and he's not playing. I will give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm so tired of hearing Kentucky fans being like, well, Quaintance is going to come back and Jalen Lowe is going to come back and that's going to make some big difference. I mean,
well, you signed Quaintance when he was coming off an ACL. So that's it's like drafting a fantasy football player like Rashee Rice this year. He's going to miss the first 6 games. So you can maybe get him at a slight discount, but I don't know that Kentucky got Quaintance at a discount, by the way, but you have to bake that in. And that's part of your season. It's an important part of your season, these non-conference games, particularly if you go into the conference season and just finish like 500-ish. Kentucky is suddenly at risk of not making the NCAA tournament, because they've played so poorly in every significant game that they've had so far. So like, yeah, the Quaintance thing is like, it's a thing. They'll probably be better on the back line when he comes back and he'll give them more offensive rebounding and so on and so forth. Theoretically, he's coming off an ACL. We don't know that for sure. But he's also Jaden Quaintance. He's not Darren Peterson. He's not Cam Boozer. He's not like, he had a nice year at Arizona State last year. He is not the, like, this guy is a top 3 pick NBA center type of guy who's going to come in and immediately transform your defense. At least I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, he can help the defense for sure. And I do think that Marino has had to kind of step up, and like, it's understandable that he's a freshman who's going to have some growing pains, but they need him to be their guy at this point, and they're putting a lot of pressure on him. And you saw it in the North Carolina game, and you saw it in the Gonzaga game when he goes up against some of these elite level bigs. It's like he looks like a freshman. He has freshman moments, which is understandable, but they really don't have an option. I mean, Garrison hit a 3 against North Carolina. That was the one 3 that they made of consequence pretty much down the stretch. But other than that, I mean, they just have no front court presence. And I think, to me, the real damning part, I guess, if you're a Kentucky fan, is watching Mark Few and what he was able to do in that game, which is like, we're going to dominate you inside out. and you're going to stand on the perimeter and have no options. And it's going to like exacerbate the problem the entire game. And I think that's why the visual aspect of it for Kentucky fans was so jarring, because they're just kind of watching this team get easy shots around the basket. Braden Huff, little turnaround over his shoulder. Graham Ike, a little easy pump fake dunk, and then they go on the other end and they're like, we can't even get inside the 3-point line. Where is this electric, amazing offense that we saw last season? Well, it doesn't really work when there's no guy trying to initiate. There's no dribble handoff actions. There's no Amari Williams who can be a big man that can be a relief and a release in the high post to help you get back cuts and options, especially when the guys don't move at all and they don't have the basketball. So, like, I just think from a visual aspect, it was so bad. And it's something that maybe there's a lesson to be learned and maybe they can turn things around. But just looking at their schedule, like the Indiana game isn't as much of a kind of feather in your cap just because they get, upset by Minnesota. Obviously, the Louisville game happened, so they're not like as hot as they were. They were a top 7 team in the net, just a week ago when you and I were talking. They're not quite there, but they're still a good team. So maybe that helps if you can figure out things in that game, and that's a quality win. But the quality wins in non-conference are slowly declining, which again is going to go back. We don't want to talk about the bubble and stuff, but it's going to bring itself back around where, hey, if you're a bubble team, guess what? Quain's isn't coming back. He's going to the NBA. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like some of that stuff too, where it's like all these saviors who are going to come back. Jalen Lowe might not be as interested to come back with his injury because he's like, well, we're not even a tournament team. So that to me is kind of the most damning part. And the honeymoon phase lasted with Mark Pope until the Calipari game last year. I think that was the first time when Cal came back and won that game where Kentucky fans were like, wait a second, that's not supposed to happen, especially against a bad Arkansas team. And that was the first time where they kind of raised their eyebrows. Now they're booing. I was joking online. I was like, it's Big Boo Nation. I mean, they are live, active in Nashville, taking over the arena as they do because they're such a great fan base, and just actively booing their team. And, Mark Pope afterwards says it's, something that we deserve. DeMarcus Cousins is tweeting like this team has no energy, no effort. And I just don't really know if there's a recourse for this season. And if you told me that during the exhibition season that Kentucky, December 8th would be potentially on the outs as far as the NCAA tournament, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, did everybody get hurt? No, they just don't like playing with each other, and they don't seem to like each other. And Mark Pope seems to have a mutiny on his hands. And again, this is all conjecture, but it looks like reality based on the basketball we're seeing.
Right. And the thing is, too, that's troubling and why Kentucky fans, should be concerned beyond just, yeah, we're hurt and yeah, the guys haven't played well. Even if you had a magical, like, Coach Carter Friday Night Lights, like come together moment in practice this week, right? Where everybody just suddenly, for the purposes of the thought experiment, you snapped your fingers and everyone woke up the next day and they were the tightest, most connected team in college basketball. They would improve undoubtedly, particularly with some of the stuff I'm talking about, getting on the offensive glass, steals, defense, protection on the back line, like just the think about the way Houston plays. If you could transport Houston's sort of collective ethos into this Kentucky team's brains and hearts, they would improve. But they would still have the problems, even at full strength with Quaintance in the roster. You go down the list of players: Jalen Lowe, Otega Owe, Denzel Aberdeen, Mo Diabate, Jaden Quaintance, Cam Williams, Brandon Garrison, Colin Chandler, Jasper Johnson, Moreno, Noah, Yelovich. You have to find a sustainable rotation from that group of players that A, works in and of its own right, that is functional, that has some shooting in it, but still maintains its defense. Like Colin Chandler is basically your only shooter at this point. Jalen Lowe is a shot 27% from 3 at Pitt last year. He's not a perimeter scoring threat in the same way that past Mark Pope guards have been. And you have to do it in a way that doesn't completely isolate and send off those other guys to the shadow realm to the point where they're no longer functional members of the team that they joined for a lot of money and expected to be a big part of. And so there's, even if Kentucky gets to the point, and this is why I think this situation is particularly intractable, because we've seen lots of teams have rough starts. They don't seem to like each other. They decide to come together. You write the story when they're in the second round of the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, at the Elite Eight media availability, you go and do the big profile and you talk to everybody, talk about the moment that they flip the switch. We do that. There's a team like that every year in college basketball.
Arkansas last year.
Exactly, 100%.
Boogie Flan gets hurt and their whole season changes, right?
Yeah, and it can happen, and it happens a lot. But the actual personnel here, barring some changes in performance, still faces all of the same questions and then some because of how they've been playing that pretty much everyone had in the offseason, or at least most people that didn't just look at, oh, they got this guy and they got this guy and well, did kind of the 2 + 2 = 6 sort of roster math that people can do in the offseason. It's like, how does this roster actually fit? And most smart people in the offseason were kind of wondering, especially offensively, how is this roster going to fit? Who are the guys? How are they going to work? If they don't play differently than they have in the past, stylistically, how does this work? And we still don't have the answer to that question. And that's the question that could persist even if Kentucky magically starts to love each other and play hard for each other and really show a noticeable change in effort on the court. It still just may not work. And so that's why it's feeling unsolvable. If you're Mark Pope, and maybe is part of the reason why he seemed like he's so devastated is because he just may know the original sin of this team was the roster construction, and whatever the emotional stuff that's happened in the locker room or with this group of guys, if they care, they don't care, whatever the case may be, the fixing of the roster construction has to happen after the season is over. And that just may be where they are.
And there's nowhere to hide. I mean, look, Indiana coming up, like I said, at least that game is in Rupp, but then you got St. John's right after that. So their next 2 games could be also just kind of adding insult to injury where, if I think Indiana has looked a lot better than Kentucky. So it's going to be tough to win in Rupp. I think winning in Rupp is like its own different game. I know, Todd Golden got crushed this week saying that Cameron Indoor is worth 10 points. I'd say Rupp is worth 10 points. You know what I mean? So I just think that's just the reality.
Assuming Rupp isn't booing its own team the entire time.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
if they're not actively rioting in the stands.
It's 10 points the other way if they start booing Mark Pope.
That can go minus 10 points if there's flares being lit off in the concourse or whatever.
So maybe that's another one where they could if they could get back on course this week and win both those games, then we're not in complete free fall and we're not in the panic button zone because they at least have a couple wins that you can point to and say, hey, we did something in the at-large or outside of our conference. But I do feel like I wanted to ask you just last thing on Pope in general, how long is the leash for him? For these fans, because you and I mean, you're an Indiana guy. You went to Indiana, so you know Kentucky fans well. I went to North Carolina. I know Kentucky fans well. Both of our programs have played Kentucky. We have Kentucky people in our life. I have some family that used to be in Bowling Green, Kentucky. They have a very short fuse when it comes to Big Blue Nation and the expectation. And I just feel like once you get on the shit side of these people, they don't, you have to win a national championship to get back. And even when you do, they still don't like it. Look at Tubby Smith. He won a national championship and they're still like, yeah, but he's not Pitino. So I just wanted to know, how long is the leash on Pope and when do they really start to get loud? Because it was concerning in Nashville. It felt like a moment. It felt like a turning point, in my opinion.
Yeah, they may already be there. And maybe most of that is directed at the players. And it's a more permissible climate for it now because true. These guys are making a ton of money, and Kentucky's roster in particular is has been reported to have cost the $22 million in NIL spend, which is just an insane amount of money for any college basketball team to spend on its roster. When you're hearing all offseason oh yeah, such and such team is at the higher end, they spent 10 to 12 or 12 to 14, and then the Kentucky number comes out and just whoa. Not exactly bargain shopping or money balling it.
I'm not sure I believe that 22 million, but it's definitely that. I think it's up there.
It sounds high. There have been attempts to break it down. It might be a little high, but it's still the point is that they just said in theory anyway, and from the case seems to be that they essentially just said yes when someone came to them with a number. It was yes. There wasn't a whole lot of, no, actually we can go get a different guy. And when you look like a program like Florida, presumably, especially given the way their roster looks, probably would have loved to have Denzel Aberdeen on the wing this summer, and
he'd be perfect.
He probably told them, hey, I got this offer, can you match it? And they probably heard, Todd Golden staff probably heard that, we're like, well, actually, no, never mind. We wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. So yeah, I mean, look, I think the booing, to me anyway, seems at least significantly focused at the players, but no one's happy with Mark Pope, and him being a sort of program legend is only going to get you so far. I mean, we've seen that with in countless examples, notably.
I mean, look at Kenny Payne
at Indiana. Kenny Payne, exactly. I mean, like we are not going to start putting
Patrick
Mark Pope in the
Ewing.
Kenny Payne.
I mean, it really doesn't
category
matter
just
who
yet,
you
but-
are. Yeah, I mean, they'll turn on you quick. I mean, Hubert Davis has had it. You know what I mean? They're like, thanks for Walter Davis and Hubert. We appreciate you, but if you don't win, you're out. That's how
I mean,
it goes.
people can set aside their, people are emotionally intelligent enough as fans to be like, I still love you as a player. I still love you, man, but you're not a good coach. And so we don't want you to be coaching our team anymore. And a lot of the times, I mean, Hubert being the foremost example of is kind of like, cool. I love the school. I love the program. And, if you guys don't think I'm the right guy for the job, great. I'll do whatever's best for the program. That I think will metastasize more and more as we go along if things continue at this rate. Like, would it surprise you if he was? I don't know what his contract situation is, and we live in a world now where that kind of doesn't seem to matter as much as it used
Right.
to. I remember covering the sport and being like, fans being like, this coach has got to go. He's got to get in. And you're like, yeah, but his buyout's like $10 million. So there's no way they're going to pay that. That feels like small potatoes to a lot of these places now when you see college football coaches getting fired and, they have $60 million left on their deal or whatever, and people just figure it out and don't care.
And a lot of times they're going to get another job.
If it's this spring, where if this continues and they just cut ties right here and go do another coaching search, like we're kind of trending in that direction.
I just could not. If you told me last year at this time during the honeymoon phase that was even in the realm of possibility, I would have laughed at you. If you told me at the start of this year that was in the realm of possibility, I would have laughed at you. But I did feel like in Nashville that was a moment where it could be trending in that direction. And I will tell you this: Mark Pope will get a job anywhere else. Mark Pope is a really good basketball coach, and I don't really have any qualms about that fact. But again, once you get on the wrong side of the line, it's really hard to get back on the other side for anybody that gets in the hot seat conversation. Now, I'm not sure he's in the hot seat conversation yet, but that felt like a moment where, like, there's a lot of eyeballs here. These people are not happy. And there's one thing that everybody knows players can control, which is energy and effort. And if they're not showing that, then there's one finger to be pointed, and it's pointed at the coach. And Mark Pope, I mean, I tweeted like the black smoke, in the Pope, like we haven't decided a new Pope. I thought we had white smoke for Mark Pope. Like I thought a decision was made. But I think we might be back in the decision room trying to figure it out, which is concerning for Big Blue Nation.
It is. And one other thing that I saw a little bit of talk of, or that I have seen, is maybe adding some to this frustration is the fact that this roster was expensively assembled from college basketball veterans in a year, and it's not performing. If it was performing, this would obviously be different. In a year where the talent of freshmen is extremely high, and you have impact freshmen at tons of programs, including one that Kentucky just lost to in North Carolina. And I'm assuming there are probably Kentucky fans who are like, hey man, I was a little over Cal by the end, but we would have gotten one of these guys, and we just have none of them. And the guys that we got don't fit together, and they're expensive. And one of them's coming off an ACL injury. And there's just a lot of different frustrations baked in, I think, now when you
and
look
to
at the
have
landscape of college
Dixon, a
basketball.
freshman for North Carolina, hit the dagger shot to hit that three. You know what I mean? Like, I think you're right.
Yeah.
That adds insult to injury. Like, Caleb did not have his best game, but he still had an impactful game, and he still looks like a lottery pick out there. And Jasper Johnson,
and
does
he's
not
fun
look
to
like a
watch.
lottery pick.
No one,
yeah,
Kentucky's players aren't fun to watch right now. And Otega Oweh was fun to watch last year, so it's not like he can't be. Like he was a very fun player last year. But even if you're gonna be like a 6 or 7 seed, at least give the fans a Caleb Wilson or whatever. Name any one of the 20 awesome freshmen in college basketball this year. I mean, they take a Jalen Harrelson at this point. So
Matt Abel at NC State, right?
Anybody. So it's a big mess, and it doesn't look like it's going to be not a mess anytime soon. But that's where I'm at Kentucky right now. I think the cake might be baked there, and it's not a good looking cake. It's a very ugly and potentially burned cake, and we'll see how it goes. Speaking of talented freshmen, Duke has some, as is usually the case, and a super impressive win at Michigan State for a relatively young team. But the thing about Duke and watching them play, Tate, and particularly watching Cam Boozer play, and I want to run this by you as teased at the top. I don't know if I've ever seen a freshman who looks more like a junior or a senior playing college basketball who is also widely considered like a one and done early lottery pick. Because every time I watch Cam Boozer play, I'm like, this guy is fundamentally at his best. I mean, he can step out a little bit. He's a good passer. He has a lot of elite attributes, right? I mean, he's having the best, most productive season in college basketball right now from an individual player. He's been amazing. But I feel like he's at his best when he's like bullying guys down low in a very classic college basketball sense. And I watch him play, and he reminds me of an old school forward, and he just happens to be so strong and tough at his age that it's able to work against, Florida's front court. Or anybody you could throw at him, he's going to be strong enough and physical enough to wiggle his way through and finish around the rim. And it's just funny because he feels like a guy that should somehow be like a multi-year college basketball player that I personally, as someone who is not a big draft nick, but does watch the NBA and kind of has a feel for where it is stylistically these days, I don't watch him and think NBA player, NBA, you know what I mean? Where it just jumps out at you. And that could just be my own inability to see it. But I wonder what you think of this, because he feels like a guy who should be a longtime college basketball player, but he's going to go to the NBA this year, and by all accounts will be like a top 5 pick. And that doesn't jump out to me, even as I watch him like destroy these front courts. And I feel like I'm like very confused by my Cam Boozer watching experience.
He's a perfect college basketball player, and I think he fits college basketball better than he fits the NBA, which is why everyone is trying to figure out how to talk about him. But it is very, like, if you don't say that Cam Boozer's in the number 1 pick conversation, then everyone does the classic, well, he's the best player, best freshman in college basketball. Why wouldn't he be the number 1 pick? And you're saying to yourself, well, I agree, he is. I mean, I'm watching him. He's great. I got absolutely crushed. I went to the McDonald's All-American game back in April, and when I went to the practice, I got done and did a show, and I was talking about like kind of takeaways or whatever, and I said that Boozer reminds me of Tyler Hansbrough, and I said it like in a flattering fashion, and I know it's sacrilegious to kind of cross the threshold of the two, most hated blue bloods there. But I mean, that's what he reminded me of. It's like you look up and the guy has 18 and 9, and you almost, it was kind of just like so workman-like, it's like, oh, this isn't wow factor. It's just like the job is getting done. He's making every right decision for the most part. He just gets easy buckets when he has to. The good thing for Boozer, I think that will translate, is he's been able to shoot the 3 ball. I think that's something that is encouraging. We've seen him step out and hit some big shots. But you're right. I mean, he's so perfect for college basketball. And if we lived in a time, and maybe we do move into that time a little bit more with NIL and everything, but like obviously the NBA money is too much for him not to stay. But like, if he played 4 years at Duke, even, I mean, we're talking about like, this is an all-time great, you know what I mean? One of the greatest Duke players we've ever seen. And that's a credit to him as a player. But of course, he's going to move on and he'll be a one and done. But it is very much, it's a strange viewing experience, especially when you compare it to an AJ DeBanza, or you compare it to a Darren Peterson, or you compare it to a Koa Pete even. I mean, I think him and Koa Pete are more similar than maybe most, but I still think Koa Pete has a little bit more pop to his game, a little bit more wow to his game than Cameron Boozer does. But that doesn't mean that he's a better player than Cameron Boozer. Caleb Wilson, that doesn't mean he's a better player than Cameron Boozer. So I think like that's why everyone's brain is broken when they talk about him, because they're just like, I don't see these highlight wow plays, which is what you're supposed to see, but you do see him dominate. And it's really hard to kind of have that conversation, because it's like and I say this all the time, it's like not everything in college has to be about the NBA, but it feels like we live in that economy now where it's like everything's about the translation. But if we can just enjoy him playing college basketball, I think we'll have a lot more fun. I mean, Cooper Flagg, you could see the translation easily. I think with Boozer, it's a little bit different. But again, I think the Hansbrough comp is not a knock. I think it's just one of those things where it's like to me, Hansbrough was the best player in college basketball this century. So that's because he played 4 years and was National Player of the Year and won a national championship and yada, yada, yada. But it's like Cam Boozer could do that exact thing at Duke, and it would be amazing. But because of the NBA pool, the gravitational pull, he would never do that. But I wish we would see it, right? Like, I wish I could see Cam Boozer do a full college basketball career, because it would be remarkable. It would be insane.
He'd average like 30 next year.
Yeah. every
I
year
mean, on like 12 of 18 shooting every night.
yeah.
I mean, he's a very special player, and yeah, I'm just I'm looking at various draft boards right now. I mean, he's top 3 basically locked in, which, and I mean the Sam Vecini does mention it here. He says, I wonder a bit about his long-term upside as he's not all that fluid through his hips and doesn't have a ton of shake. See, now that's like draft person talk for what I feel like I'm seeing. You know what I'm saying? But that is also the same thing that I would have stubbornly maybe 5-10 years ago, or even more recently, I guess. But I used to write a column for ESPN around the draft time, fill in some off-season content, trying to bridge the gap between college hoops and the draft, where I would sort of redraft or pre-draft based on like college production. Or just like, if you didn't and like Tyler Hansbrough was like the perfect example of this, right? It was like, you can project him as what he's going to be in the NBA because of his size and the way his game works. But, from a college basketball perspective, he's fantastic. And, sometimes this yields like some actual insights, like, like Draymond Green being the greatest example of just like, I felt like he would be a good professional player, even though he was undersized and was going to go in the second round. Like, he was just one of those guys that I thought, this guy does a lot of really good stuff on the basketball court. And we've seen how that's played out.
Brunson was that guy. Yeah. I couldn't believe Brunson felt like he did. Malcolm Brogdon, it's like some of those guys where you watch, you're just like, yeah, he's a really good basketball player. I don't really care where he has to go, but he's going to be good.
Right. And Boozer is weird for me because it's almost like it flips the script in my head a little bit, where I'm like, this guy's a one and done 5-star, undisputed, like top 3, top 5 pick. But he plays like one of these guys that would have gotten shuffled down the draft boards in the past and maybe had a more productive NBA career than expected or whatever. And in this case, you just expect it. But in any case, it is a strange viewing experience for me. But his style is perfect for winning at this level. And you saw it again in Michigan State. That is not an easy team to beat at in their own gym. I've been super pleasantly surprised with Michigan State all year. Again, in the Kentucky discussion, just the total antithesis of that, of like completely outplaying your own talent level because you're cohesive, you rebound both ends, you take care of the basketball, like all of the little things that you can control that aren't your wingspan or whatever. Their level of experience and just like all the Tom Izzo stuff baked in there. And so, to come out with a win for Duke with a younger team, the way they had to win that game, this is not searing analysis, but obviously super impressed by Duke and what they do on both ends of the ball, because they're probably better defensively right now than they are offensively, and they have the talent to continue to grow.
Yeah, Caleb Foster, huge down the stretch. He's done that twice now against Arkansas and obviously at the Breslin Center, which I thought was more impressive. I pointed that out, and I had some Duke people in my life like, well, we just saw it at Arkansas. And I was saying to myself, well, I am more impressed that he did it on the road in the Breslin Center while they're chanting F Cam Boozer, which I will say this, like, I don't think Cam Boozer is a very hateable guy. I met him. I thought he was really nice, and I feel like he's pretty likable. Like, he doesn't do any of the traditional Duke things. So even them chanting F Cam Boozer, I thought was a little bit like trying to make something a thing,
he's not a 5'10" point guard slapping the floor on every defensive possession.
I feel like Isaiah Evans, he has a little bit of Duke tinge to him, where it's like maybe you chant like F him or something, but like Boozer doesn't really give that vibe. So I thought that was a little interesting. And then Fears trying to like up the ante at the free throw line. If Fears makes 2 shots in this game, we're having a different conversation, but he goes 0 for and just could not buy a basket, which, it is what it is. But the toughness of Michigan State definitely stood out. But on the flip side of that, it's like for Duke to be able to play Michigan State's game and still find a way to win, like, that is special. I mean, you can't really, I know Michigan should be number 1 and that most people expect them to be number 1, but like Duke, because of their ability to adapt to whatever game they have to play, and for John Shire to kind of know who needs to be in the game for these situations, and the development of Caleb Foster, I feel like those are all really encouraging signs. So you're right. I mean, I'm with you on Duke. I think Boozer's only going to get better. I think, Haminia will get better as the season kind of goes on. And I just think that I was really worried about the point guard position, but they figured out a way to get Caleb Foster, assisting people, dribbling with his head up, not being kind of like a downhill scoring guard, being more than that, and also hitting big shots down the stretch, including free throws. So I came away impressed with them as usual, and Tom Izzo came away pissed off, which he had a great press conference after that game. If you didn't see it, anybody, go watch that. It's a nice 12 minutes of fun.
Yeah, and you can get away with point guard play not being a sure, like, established one or two guys if you've got a player like Cam Boozer, who I'm just looking now, his assist rate is 26%, his turnover rate is 8%, which
Pretty
is
good.
ludicrous for a guy with a plus 30% usage rate, taking a ton of shots, getting a ton of rebounds, and also doing that when he has the ball in his hands. Like, he's really, really good. No dispute there. It's just funny watching him. Maybe I'm too Cooper flag pilled, and I was just too
I think that's what it is.
Last year.
We just watched that. We watched like an all-time point forward kind of elite talent playing the same position. So it's definitely a different type of play, but it is impressive.
And this guy's just like bullying everybody under the rim and just like shoving guys out of the way. It's just like
it's a throwback.
It's like little brother basketball where you're just like holding a guy, by his forehead and throwing the ball in the rim over the top of him. Very different styles, but pretty much equally effective. That's the thing about Cam Boozer, is like he is about as effective right now as Flag was last year, and that's saying something because Flag was spectacular for Duke, for an all-time good Duke team too. All-time good. There's another good transition. Iowa State at Purdue. Oof. We do not see non-conference wins in true road environments against teams like Purdue, ranked number 1 coming into the weekend, like this basically ever. And I think you can, having watched the game, you can credit some of it, and I do want to credit some of it to just some ridiculous shot making, particularly by Momcilovic. Like, he had a couple of shots when Iowa State was really rolling that were like no dribble, 18-footers, one pivot step, kind of wrong foot fadeaway type of things, and it just goes down, and he's like turned into the Purdue fans and screaming at them, just like, okay, this guy is on a heater. Like, if you're Matt Painter, you're just like, oh god, like, sure, of course that's going in.
48% as a team from 3. Iowa State.
And he's also played that well to start the season. Iowa State got hotter than their normal, but this has been a thing with them now for the past 2 years. It's like, for a couple years previous to this, they were like an elite defensive team, caused a ton of turnovers, really got after you, and couldn't really score it on the other end unless they were getting layups in transition. They were just in half-court offensive situations. They were not very good. That changed last year, and they got a lot more effective, and they've carried that over into this season. And you see the effects of it, where you can go into a team like Purdue, you can give Braden Smith hell all day, and move guys around, press everything out to 25, 30 feet, and then come down on the other end. And if you get slowed down into a half-court position, fine. You'll run your stuff and get at the rim and get good looks. And Lipsy's swinging the ball from the right wing to the left corner, and they're spacing you out. And it was just a really super impressive, comprehensive performance that I think you can credit to the crazy shot making to some degree, but you also have to give Iowa State a lot of credit for the way they've sort of rejiggered their fundamentals of who they are these past 2 seasons.
Absolutely. And Torrey was great in this game as well. I know Lipsy got a lot of credit. I think he ended up with 8 assists in this game, but there is kind of a blueprint to beating Braden Smith Purdue, which is get him off his spot, get him turning the basketball over. And that was, when they lost in the NCAA tournament, and got the major upset, and we were all shocked at what happened. I mean, it was because he had 7 turnovers in that game. In this game, he has 6 turnovers. So, like, there is a way to get up in his grill with ball pressure, but you need to have elite perimeter defenders, which is not a guarantee in this game. And for what Torrey did in this game, what Lipsy did in this game, the fact that they made him work for everything, the fact that Purdue didn't make shots from the outside, and they ended up shooting like 20% from 3, maybe it's a little bit better, maybe like 25%, but it was terrible. I don't think they made like 3 or 4 threes in the game. So in general, it just felt like the perfect storm for Iowa State. We make everything. You miss everything. Braden Smith plays his worst game of the season. Our guards are all up in his shit. And, you would think that they would need to get to the free throw line and create some chaos that way, but they go to the free throw line 5 or 6 times in this game. Like, this was not where they won this game at the line. They won this game with shot making and with defensively what they did on the perimeter. And, Braden Smith's the best point guard in college basketball, but Lipsy had a game where he outplayed him and outclassed him in Mackey Arena, which is not an easy task. And again, you mentioned it, like, this was history. This was a number 1 team in the country losing by the most a number 1 team has ever lost, 23 points. They tied the record. So it was shocking. Like, when I was watching this game, I just kept seeing it scaling up, and I'm like, man, they're going to win this game by 20 points. Like, you talk about the net ranking and everything. Like, this is going to be the computers are going to love this win for Iowa State, and I feel like this is the type of game that can get Iowa State not only in the top 5 but potentially a 1 seed when we get to March.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to know how impressive Michigan's Players Era Classic performance was, Iowa State's undefeated. They are 6th in adjusted offense, 2nd on defense. They have beaten St. John's. They have blown out Mississippi State, blown out Creighton, blown out Syracuse, blown out Purdue at Purdue. And they are still 2nd in adjusted efficiency at KenPom.com because Michigan is number 1. That is a hell of a feast week if you're the Michigan Wolverines, man, to still be firmly in that top spot by a couple of points in net rating is wild. But incredible game for Iowa State. And yeah, I mean, repeatable. I don't think they'll shoot the ball like that every time they go on the road in conference play. But they are offensively good enough and have been really for a while now, save some of their injured stretch down the back half of last season where they kind of fell off a little bit. This is kind of what Iowa State is now. And TJ has really blended, he did the thing that coaches sometimes do when they're getting a program like up and running at a higher level, is like really bought in on one side of the ball. This is our whole identity. Mm-hmm. And then once you establish that as what you do, you bring up the rest of the stuff alongside it, kind of in tweaks and stuff. They haven't completely, rethought their offense in like a strategic way. They just have guys who can make shots at some of those positions now in ways they didn't before. And they can give up a little bit on the turnover end. And if you have Taman Lipsey in your backcourt, you're going to generate steals and easier buckets more often than you would if you did not have him. So yeah, incredible performance.
3. Yeah, Jefferson, Momcilovic, and Lipsey. I mean, that's a really solid big 3. And you got like Heisey coming off the bench. Torrey was good in this game. Obviously, you know what I mean? Like they got
Jefferson is incredible, by the way. Like talk about a player slept on coming back this year. Mm-hmm. There was not a lot of offseason chatter about Josh Jefferson being, one of the best players in the Big 12 this year, but he's been that so far for them. He's been spectacular. And
I think
like
if his name stood out a little bit more, we would talk about him more. Like Josh Jefferson just feels like it feels like a computer generated name. But if his name was he had some special whatever to his name, then we would talk about him more. So Josh Jefferson, we see you. We respect your game. That's a good way to put it.
We do, yeah. Josh Jefferson is definitely a NBA 2K. You've run out all you don't have the real draft picks.
You're in 2040.
Yeah. Okay, who else did? I wanted to. Well, we talked a little bit about Ole Miss St. John's before. I am interested to see if this is a bit of a turning point for Ole Miss. I mean, St. John's was St. John's in that they were the St. John's I more expected. They could not shoot the ball at all, but they guarded well and created a ton of turnovers. I think Ole Miss had 20 turnovers, something like that. But Chris Beard started different guys. After last week's loss to, I can't remember who they lost to. They got blown out, and he was, talking about effort in the post-game press conference.
Yeah, with AJ Storr, right?
With AJ Storr. He started Storr, so AJ Storr innocent, I guess, in this. But Malik Dia was on the bench. Giffa was on the bench. Camerdine did start.
It was Miami, right?
Miami. Yeah. That's who they lost to. Yep. And so he kind of backed up his, how do you get better effort? And he's like, oh, we can fix that. We'll play different players. Mm-hmm. And so he did, and came out of the game thinking that his team played hard enough to win it, which is positive. Like he like in the quotes I read earlier, this was a step in the right direction for Ole Miss, even though they ended up losing the game in a tough road game at St. John's. Probably the expectations of them winning outright weren't super high in the first place. But I'm just I'm fascinated by this Ole Miss team because there's a talent there, and they have fallen down on the emotional hard work front in a way that I again, as he said, I don't think we've ever really seen from a Chris Beard team. And he's now kind of trying to rebuild up that baseline so that you can get to the point where you're playing hard enough that you can deserve to win games by actually putting the performance together.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed with Dia coming off the bench. He was almost better off the bench. He ended up having 18 points in that game, which in a game where you score 58 points, those 18 points really matter. I'm fascinated just by their roster build. There was a guy on their bench who's not playing. I think he's injured at the moment, but Nico Bundalo, he's a McDonald's All-American, so we haven't seen him yet. So maybe there's some sort of like potential for this team to strike up and find some new guys to create a new mix with this group. But the interesting part to me and the ironic part was that he's sitting next to AJ Storr, who, if there's one knock on AJ Storr, it's not his talent, it's his effort. And him saying that next to AJ Storr, yes, he didn't bench him, but I do feel like it was sending a message that like that could happen to you as well. Like nobody is safe here.
Well, and especially because the question was, AJ, how do you? It was directed to AJ Storr.
Right.
The reporter was like, how do you get guys? If you're thinking you're not motivated, how do you get guys motivated? And he had started to answer. He's like, well, there's not really a lot you can do. And Beard was like, whoa. Like, actually, yes,
there actually is something you can do.
You can put your asses on the bench is what can happen. And so it was kind of funny. I was just like, AJ, that buddy. You may be innocent in all this, but you cannot say that there's no way to motivate people with your coach sitting 2 feet away from you at a press conference table, because he is not going to agree with you.
Yeah, that was a little like not to put him in that camp too much, but like it was a little Bobby Knight-esque, or like, it was just like, all right, shut up.
Yeah.
I will answer this question for us. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that shouldn't be your first instinct, son. Like people can always be motivated.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see on Ole Miss, but they are interesting to me, and it is as a corollary to the Kentucky team. Obviously not nearly as high as expectations coming in, but some talent there, have underachieved, have lost most of their meaningful non-conference games to start the season, and a coach also figuring out how to get more out of his guys from a buy-in standpoint. Yeah. But yeah, a coach with a pretty long track record of doing so at different levels, and so it'll be interesting to see sort of the parallels between them and Kentucky as we go along. Indiana, Louisville, can touch on it briefly here. I mean, it was I said earlier, Louisville got out to a 16-0 run to start the game. Indiana couldn't make anything. Indiana couldn't get good looks to start the game, which is a credit to Louisville's defense. And the two essentially played relatively even for the rest of the game, and Indiana could never just couldn't close it enough to make it a close game. But I was once again impressed with Louisville in that I have experienced, or I have conceptualized them as really great guard play, up and down, let's have fun out there, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what Indiana is too, but Louisville is just more solid around the margins. They have better bigs. They have, Frew is a tougher interior kind of guy than your Reed Baileys of the world. Going to get you more on the offensive end, rebounding wise and defensive wise on the back line. And then Louisville has guys like, Javon Hadley that are, with the exception of Bailey, Hadley is kind of a tweener forward guy who can do, some 3-and-D type of things and give you a bunch of flexibility on the wing. He's like the same size basically as like Sam Alexis. And that's Indiana's other big guy of note. They just don't have that much to offer in that regard. And so you get yourself into a shooting contest. And Tucker DeVries did his best. He had a couple threes, particularly in the first half after that 16-0 run where you're like, okay, Indiana could get back into this. But there's a ceiling to that sort of thing if you don't have some of the other stuff. And I think that's just kind of where Indiana is going to be for most of the year. If they shoot the ball really well, they get up and down the floor, it moves and pops and all that good stuff. They'll be a really tough team to guard and a tough team to beat. But Louisville is Indiana, but more so, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're like the A version versus the A- version or B version, whatever you want to say. I'm right there with you. I think Ryan Conwell has been the revelation for me. I did not, there's a lot of names on that Louisville team that I thought would be sort of the main talking point, whether it's, Brown or you mentioned Hadley. I mean, even like Pryor coming back from his injury, maybe he was one of those guys that would have a big type of year. But it really has been Conwell, which is a Xavier transfer, kind of in the Sean Miller camp of things, and he has been great for them. And I think he is an Indiana guy, so maybe there's a little bit of extra, motivation there going back to Indy.
Those Indy guys love to play at Gamebridge, man. It's like the garden for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just feel like everyone kind of talks about the guys you're supposed to talk about when it comes to Louisville because everybody, had an expectation of who's who and what's what. But I think Conwell, to me, has been a real star for this team.
Yeah. And it was, Isaac McNeely is, again, like the third biggest offensive, sometimes fourth biggest offensive threat on that team, which is just madness. He
right.
was 5 of 9 from 3 the other day. And there were a couple where you could see Darian DeVries' heart breaking a little bit because they were just like missed assignments in transition or whatever, and McNeely's just pulling up for a catch and shoot three at the top of the key, and it's just like that is going in. I would bet my mortgage that shot is going in because he spent his time at Virginia never getting those kinds of looks, and he's getting them for Louisville now, and they're going in about as often as you would expect them to.
He has to feel like he's wide open every time he shoots now,
Yeah.
It's like
you saw him play at Virginia and all the crazy stuff they were running to try and get him, like, they're running the Rip Hamilton, like, pin down stuff to get him, like, two guys flying at him, open threes in the
it was the Rip Hamilton, JJ Redick, like, you run around and just try to tire these guys out, and eventually you'll get a shot, but you're going to be fading off to the side.
And he shot like 42% or whatever from three there, and so now he's like pulling into transition threes with no one around him. It's got to feel great. But yeah, nice performance from Louisville, and again, I said during the Kentucky thing, like, not to bring everything in this podcast back to effort, but it is an overriding theme. Like, Indiana, that's if that had happened to Kentucky, you may have seen them like essentially walk off the floor. And Indiana tried their absolute best to get back in the game all the way through and made the final score actually look a little bit more forgiving than the actual, the performance during the game was. So not the worst thing in the world either if you're taking a disappointing loss to fight all the way through and kind of prove some of your qualities down the stretch. UNC Georgetown, real quick. Georgetown tracker segment of the podcast, which we've been doing. I know it's random, but I don't know why. I don't know why I'm so interested in Georgetown. It's not looking great. What did you make of Carolina in the game? Because I'm warming up. I'm warming up on Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, the front court is those two guys. I mean, Vasar and Caleb Wilson. I mean, you really can't find a better 1-2 punch with those guys being able to play off of each other. Obviously, two double machines. Caleb Wilson in this game, 0 dunks. I saw there was a lot of people trying to call him a dunk merchant during the week, and then he decided to just like show you the full array of what he can do on a basketball court. I loved Cooley after the game was like, everyone's trying to talk about who Caleb Wilson is. I mean, he's like, I think there's one guy that's pretty obvious is Tracy McGrady, and I think that's a really good comp for him potentially. I mean, both guys are 6'8". The one thing I would say that's different about T-Mac, and I love T-Mac. I was more of a Vince Carter guy than a T-Mac guy. They called him the big sleep for a reason. Like, T-Mac did not like team meetings. T-Mac did not like working hard. T-Mac was just like a natural talent. Like, I remember when he was in Durham and everyone's just like, yeah, this guy is unbelievable, but I don't know how much he really cares about that fact. He could be Michael Jordan, I guess, if he wanted to be. I think Caleb has a totally different work ethic and motor, which is special, but I like that comparison that he gave. And then the point guard situation for North Carolina is really the fascinating part for this team. Dixon, what he did against Kentucky felt like a passing of the baton moment, almost like Larry Drew, Kendall Marshall, like, okay, we're supposed to have this guy who's our point guard, but really it might be better if you're the point guard, even though you're a freshman. And I think Dixon was great in this game, probably had his second best game of the season. Evans is such a good player off the catch and shoot that I think those two guys playing together is actually great for North Carolina's backcourt. Bogavac is looking better. So it's all kind of trending in the right direction. Stevenson's been great on defense. So, yeah, I mean, they're figuring things out. I think this was a nice win to get a 20-point win for the metrics of it all, which is nice. And Georgetown, they're a little nasty. They're a little scrappy. I thought they would have a little bit more fight in this game. But, again, when Caleb Wilson's hitting shots like that and Vasar is able to dominate, they really just had no answer for Carolina.
Yeah, and they just can't shoot.
Yeah.
They just have no shooting in that roster. Yeah. I mean, it's just they're 29% from three on the year. Not taking a ton of them. They just don't have a whole lot of spacing and flexibility to their offense. I mean, the one thing you can say for them is they never turn the ball over. They're first in the country in turnover rate, which is helpful. But if the ball, you can commit 0 turnovers in a game, and if you shoot 10%, you're not going to win. No matter how much Buzz Williams tried to flip that math at Texas A&M the past few years. You can't. You eventually got to make some shots, and Georgetown just can't. And then their defense isn't what it was before Vince Iwuchukwu got hurt. Not got hurt.
They really
miss
him at the
medical
rim.
procedure.
Yeah,
they really miss him badly, and that may be a big component to sort of the trajectory of the season, which again started well. We thought Maryland was a little better than they are when they beat Maryland at Maryland. They got the nice win over Clemson, which I think will hold up. But right now, this isn't looking like the tournament campaign that Georgetown maybe thought it was going to be early in the year. So we'll see how things play out for them. Kansas, Mizzou. Now, we talked about Darren Peterson. He's back. That's good. This was a nice, solid win for Kansas. I'm bought in on Kansas these days, not just because Peterson's back. Like they played great without him. Super impressed by them defensively. I would maybe like to see the roster. Self went with Melvin Council in the starting lineup, and I kind of was wondering whether he would swap out Council just for Peterson wholesale, so we can see what that kind of looks like on the offensive end. It might be a little bit less unwieldy and a little bit more efficient, but Cole Rosario actually ended up taking the penalty in terms of minutes. I think he played just like 3 or 4 minutes in a game against Mizzou with Peterson back in the fold. So that's kind of an interesting thing to watch moving forward. But Mizzou is actually more interesting to me in that they are running out of opportunities to be an at-large team already. I mean, obviously they have the whole SEC season. There's going to be plenty of opportunity, and we've seen teams with, in these sort of new world, new look conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten, you can more get away with a lack of non-conference if you overcompensate in conference play. But their wins are Howard, Southeast Mizzou, VMI, Minnesota, Prairie View A&M, and the Minnesota game was at home, by the way, so it's like a quad 4 basically. South Dakota, South Carolina State, Cleveland State. They lost at Notre Dame last week. They lost to Kansas on a neutral court, and they basically got that. They've got Alabama State, Bethune-Cookman, and then they've got Illinois December 22nd.
That's a big one.
Conference play starts, and so you're very easily looking, and that's a neutral site game with Illinois too, as is tradition there. So that is a potential. You beat a ton of bad teams in the non-conference. You lost 3 games that you played against tournament competition or quasi. Notre Dame, maybe not fitting for that category, but certainly Kansas and Illinois will be in the field. And then you got to do what in the SEC? Win, certainly double-digit games, more than that probably to get in eventually. And this is a talented Missouri team that I think you can already maybe, with Mark Mitchell and Anthony Robinson coming back, that you can already maybe mark down as a team that scheduled itself into some trouble this year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Mitchell was great in that game against Kansas, but it didn't really matter. They got absolutely dog walked, and that's just kind of feels like this team does not have as high of a ceiling as I thought they did. The Notre Dame game to me was an eyebrow raising game. It was even weirder after. I don't know if you saw Gates after the game kind of like called out the Notre Dame fans like after losing. It was like, where are the fans at? Like I was here 10 years ago. This place was packed out, and then Notre Dame fans rightfully responded like, yeah, we don't care about Mizzou. That's why we're not there, So that was a fascinating wrinkle, kind of just in their season. But yeah, I mean, they're a team that I thought would be a lot better and a lot more in the mix of like, oh, wow, this is a scrappy Mizzou team that I think next year they have the #1 recruiting class coming in, or, it's probably not anymore. Probably Duke is #1 now, but they're like #1, #2 next year. So they have, I mean, all the Mizzou fans always tweet like the gates of hell, like they're all in on Dennis Gates. They think he can recruit. But again, the product is not quite there. And like you said, I mean, the non-conference just flies by. I mean, I like that we have a couple games, like Michigan plays Duke during February. That's good. I think we need more of that. So there's like some little sprinkle in of some non-conference opportunities. But all of a sudden you look up and you're in conference play and you're like, man, we missed all of our opportunities and our resume isn't what we thought it would be. And now we have to really make a run in our conference. So I feel like that's the place that Mizzou is in. And I'm not sure they're built to do that in the SEC, because the SEC, even though it's down compared to last year, it's still really good, especially at the top. So it's tough sledding for Mizzou right now.
It is, yeah. And look, I mean, it's just been a weird tenure for Dennis Gates all the way through, because obviously he had the success starting off with some of the players left behind and worked around guys in his very first season, was a 7 seed, got to the second round. Last year was great. In between that was an 0-18 SEC season. Now that was a little unlucky. They were not an 0-18 level, terrible team. But that was from a baseline sort of preseason KenPom expectation of finishing like 55th, and they finished 145th. And then, some of those same guys, notably Tamar Bates, came back last year and helped them have a really solid year and finished with a 6 seed. And they got bounced in the first round. It's not the end of the world. It's just kind of a weird deal where you're already looking at them as a team with high expectations coming in because of the talent they retained. And it shows you the value of scheduling. And we are in a world now, I think people talk about this a lot more often and have taken note of it a lot more often, that coaches are scheduling less nervously. They're going out and playing more games and just taking what comes with it. And if you lose 3 or 4 of your 6 or 7 potentially good,
it evens out. Yeah, it's what
high
Nate Oates
major
is doing.
games. Exactly. It evens out eventually, and you don't suffer as much of a penalty for it. If anything, you get rewarded because the committee likes to see it. Even if you didn't win a ton of those games, they'll still look at your non-conference strength of schedule and bump you up a little bit because of it. So there's not a whole lot of downside to it. And I don't think, even if you are going to kind of schedule lightly and avoid some of these, bigger non-conference games, and you're going to try and, like, there's a way you can do it at the margins where you're not taking on water in the form of Howard, Southeast Mizzou, VMI, Prairie View, South Dakota, South Carolina State, Cleveland State, all these lower 200s, high 300s teams in the net, where, like, the upside of beating them, unless you, even if you really beat them badly, which Mizzou has generally done, they had to hang on against Southeast Missouri. To be fair, they won that game by 5 points, which doesn't help you metrics wise. But for the most part, they've taken care of business on that front. You can do that against a team that's ranked like 150th or 120th, and you're going to get a better overall sort of metric baseline for when you get into your conference season. So I think more coaches are both smart about that, but also kind of not worrying about it as much. And they're just scheduling good games when they can, if they can, and going and being willing to play people on the road and do home and homes and that sort of thing. We've seen, I think, a bit of an uptick of that this year after just, a couple decades of decline in that regard in terms of non-conference, something. And we've talked about, on your show in the past, and the stats behind it. I think we're in a better place with that, but you see coaches getting a little bit more tactical and being a little bit smart about the teams that they do play, if they're doing bye games or mid-major games. And you just can't load up on all of these cupcakes if you're going to miss your opportunities against the high major teams you are going to play. It just puts a lot of weight on those games. It makes the Kansas game suddenly super important. It makes an otherwise kind of quiet, not a huge deal road trip to Notre Dame suddenly pretty important. And you can give yourself more of a baseline for, more cracks at it if you schedule a little bit smarter. And so I think Mizzou might have sold themselves short a little bit in that regard, but we'll see how the season plays out, and we'll certainly see how they fare in conference play, because that's that's going to end up being the determining factor for them here. Let's see, what else did I have? That's about it. Did you have anybody from the weekend you wanted to highlight or shout out?
I mean, Tennessee had a tough week.
Illinois. So that's what I had on my. Yep.
Illinois. I love Illinois. I love how they play. The ball does not stick. I feel like Kentucky should watch some Illinois tape and just watch how they pass the ball with each other and be like, hey, maybe there's a lesson to be had here. So them handling Tennessee, Syracuse beating Tennessee. Red Autry finally got a nice win. Unfortunately for him, it was followed up by Tennessee losing again, so they kind of got lost in the shuffle. But, Rick Barnes will bounce back. Obviously, the Houston win will carry some weight for them. So that was really the only other game. Nebraska, Creighton, maybe. I was, Nebraska's still undefeated. They dominated Creighton. McDermott was talking about how tough they were after the game. But those are really the big ones outside of what we just talked about. And we mentioned Michigan, which is obviously, they just score 100 points every game, it feels like, at this point. So that's also a big talking point. But yeah, I feel good. I feel like we got everything out there, and obviously we got a big week this week, Jimmy V Classic. And this upcoming Saturday, when there's no college football, finally, I feel like college basketball is going to get a spotlight, which will be good.
Yeah, we're there. It was a weird feeling all day on Saturday, because even as someone completely diehard about college basketball, it felt like the big college football Saturday from the start of the day. And then you go through the schedule like, oh yeah, right. Duh. I knew these games were on. This is great. Okay, cool. Would have been fun to be in Indianapolis for the Indiana basketball and football doubleheader, obviously. But I stayed home and watched a bunch of college basketball instead. I would like to see how Kentucky I would like to see how Kentucky responded to watching film of Illinois. I wonder how they'd feel about it. I wonder if it would be like me trying to watch someone like assemble an atomic bomb or something. Or just like, I can't.
I just don't get it. Yeah,
I don't know what you're showing me.
Completely confounded. Yeah,
I just can't see it. I don't see the Matrix here. I'm not seeing it. But maybe that'll be the next thing Mark Mark Pope tries as we discussed at length, tries to salvage this season. Okay, we'll leave it there. We will check back in on Kentucky and everybody else next week after we go through another great non-conference week and see what's popping come this weekend. Tate, thank you as ever for joining us.
Of course,
everybody go check out Tate's stuff at the Ringer. As always, please go check out Basket Under Review. Check out Homefield, our sponsor. Thanks to all of them, and thanks to Trilly Donovan and our producer Corey Aldis and graphics guy Sam Frazier for all their work and help with the podcast. Go like and subscribe. Leave us a review. We'll see you next week. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.